Hey everybody, welcome back to the Optometry Money Podcast. We're helping ODs all over the country make better and better decisions around their money, their careers, and their practices. I am your host, Yvonne Mindrin, certified financial planning practitioner and owner of Optometry Wealth Advisors, an independent financial planning firm just for optometrists nationwide. And thank you so much for listening. Today's episode, we are going to dive into important student loan changes as the Department of Education just released at the beginning of this month a new final rule implementing all of the recent changes that we've been talking about over the months with two important surprises. And it's those two surprises I want to highlight in this episode. But before I dive into those, I just want to walk through again how we got here, right? What has happened over the last couple of years? And if you've been paying attention to the student loan landscape or just listening to the podcast, reading our content here, there have been two separate things that have been impacting student loans separately. Number one was this Save Plan court case or court cases that have been ongoing. And essentially what had happened was the legality of the Save Plan was challenged in courts. And then after a couple of years and several appeals later, we finally had a ruling earlier this year that essentially and effectively kills the Save Plan. Now, we had a feeling this was coming. This was kind of our expected outcome. But it is now official. The Save Plan is dead. It's not coming back. Ladies and gentlemen, dear optometrists, it's time to move on. And that Save Forbearance, if you've been on that Save Forbearance over the years, that's not been earning you credit towards forgiveness. Interest was accruing again, so there really is no reason to continue on anyways. But now you're going to have to make a decision. So essentially what happened as a result of that court case is, number one, the entire rule that allowed for the Save Plan, which includes a bunch of provisions around other things related to federal student loans, that entire rule was vacated. It's done away with. And starting July 1st of this year, there's going to be a 90-day window for anyone who's still on the Save Plan forbearance to make a decision to go to somewhere else. Now, you can hop onto IBR, pay-as-you-earn, potentially still available. But it's time to make a decision to go somewhere else. And if you don't do anything by the end of that 90-day window, the Department of Education says that you're going to be enrolled into a standard type repayment plan. So between now and 90 days after July 1st of this year, it's time to make a decision. And you're probably going to want to make a decision sooner rather than later. But that's what's happened as a result of that court case. Now, this also impacts something called PSL buyback. PSLF buyback was something that allowed you to buy back all of these months in Save Forbearance for purposes of public service loan forgiveness once you hit that point where you would have hit 120 payments, including those months of forbearance. But as a result of these rulings, you're not going to be able to use the Save Plan as a way to calculate the cost of those months. You're going to have to use a different plan, pay-as-you-earn, for example, if you hopped onto pay-as-you-earn after that forbearance. So the court cases were the first thing. The second big thing that happened was that in 2025, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act was signed into law. And that law made big sweeping changes to the federal student loan landscape, especially for income-driven repayment. And it's essentially split borrowers into two groups. It's those of you who are, on the one hand, currently graduated and practicing optometrists versus current or future students. More specifically, it's those of you who won't be taking any federal loans on or after July 1st of this year or consolidating your loans versus anyone that will take federal loans on or after July 1st of this year or will consolidate your federal loans. There's two separate rules happening for each of those groups. So for those of you that are currently graduated optometrists, you're currently practicing, and you won't be taking any federal loans on or after July 1st, or consolidating your loans, which is really important. Consolidation is a factor here. The income-driven options moving forward for you are going to be consolidating into two. Either the IBR plan, which is one of the ones that currently exists, or the newly created RAP, the Repayment Assistance Plan, with the other plans like pay-as-you-earn phasing out. So it's going to be consolidating your options there. And anyone that takes any federal loans on or after July 1st of this year, or consolidates your federal loans, and that consolidation is finished and processed on or after July 1st, the only options you're going to have available to you are the RAP plan or their new tiered standard repayment plan. So it's really important for those of you who are considering consolidating your federal student loans for whatever reason. I would be highly hesitant to do that moving forward because it's just going to restrict your options of the repayment plans that you have. Now, it's important to remember IBR has two different versions. There's an old version with a 25-year timeline to forgiveness and a less favorable repayment calculation, and a new version, which is a 20-year timeline to forgiveness and a more favorable payment calculation. It's essentially a twin of pay-as-you-earn. And which one you're going to qualify for depends on when you took out your very first federal loans. If you took out your very first federal loans before July 1st of 2014, you're only eligible for old IBR. If you took your very first federal loans on July 1st of 2014, then you have the best option available, which is the new version of IBR. The ones to me that have been impacted the most or disadvantaged the most for current optometrists as a result of the law were those of you that were eligible for pay-as-you-earn, but not eligible for new IBR. So for those of you that borrowed between 2007 and before fall of 2014, because on the one hand, you had pay-as-you-earn, which is a 20-year timeline of forgiveness and a more favorable payment calculation, and that's sort of been pulled out from under you here. The rug has been pulled out from under you a little bit here. Now your only option moving forward is going to be that 25-year timeline under old IBR. So maybe that changes again with a future Congress, future administration, but unfortunately, it's those of you who have been disadvantaged the most. Now, the second one that's going to be available is that RAP. That's expected to be available on July 1st of this year. And this plan is different. It's very different from how we've seen income-driven plans work in the past. And it's a 30-year timeline to forgiveness, which is essentially a career-long tax. And that being said, it is eligible for PSLF. So you still can qualify for that 10-year PSLF. So if you are PSLF eligible, this is still going to be an option for you here. And it has a totally different payment calculation from what we've seen before. This one is going to take your adjusted gross income, your AGI, which is 911 on your federal tax return, and it's going to multiply that by a percentage. And it's either going to be anywhere from 1% all the way to 10%, depending on how high your income is. Once you get to an AGI of 100,000 or beyond, it's going to be a 10% calculation. And if you have kids, your payment's going to be reduced by $50 per month per dependent child. And there is no cap on payments here. With IBR, there is a cap on payment, and they're going to cap that based on the standard repayment amount when you enter that repayment plan. That's going to be the cap. Your payments won't go higher than that. With RAP, there is no cap. It will go as high as your income will take it. There are some benefits, though. You can file separately and exclude spouse's income, so that's something that's available here. And unpaid interest is waived. That means if your payments are low enough to where it doesn't cover all of the interest in the year, you don't have accumulated interest piling up, that unpaid interest is waived, which can be helpful if you are potentially going to be eligible for PSLF, but you're really not sure where your career is going to head. And maybe the other direction that you would take is going to the private sector and otherwise paying off your loans in full. That interest subsidy can be really helpful in those specific situations. So RAP plan, again, a really long timeline of forgiveness with those additional details there. So that's what's going to be available for those of you who have graduated, you are practicing, and you don't take additional loans on or after July 1st, and do not consolidate your federal loans on or after July 1st. Now, what's important to know is that although that consolidation of your options are happening, you can still use pay-as-you-earn because that plan is sunsetting, and it's going to be phasing out sometime between now and July 1st of 2028. So if you are on pay-as-you-earn and you are not eligible for the new IBR, you can continue to use pay-as-you-earn at least up until July 1st of 2028. Now, you do have to make a decision to hop onto another plan by July 1st of 2028, because if you don't, you're very likely going to be auto-enrolled into RAP from that point moving forward. So you do need to remember to make a decision beforehand. But that being said, there is a sunsetting of pay-as-you-earn up until that point. So that July 1st deadline, that July 1st date is a really important date. Please keep that in mind and please be very careful about consolidating your federal loans, especially at this point. It's becoming less and less likely that it's going to get processed and dispersed by that July 1st timeline. So keep that in mind there. Now, on May 1st, the Department of Education released the official final rule, which implements all of the changes from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act and fills in the gaps from that SAVE plan final rule going away. This rule is going to be in effect July 1st of 2026 of this year. And much of it is what we expected just from the law itself as it was passed, with two surprises. And it's those two surprises that I want to dive into today. The first surprise is who will be eligible for pay-as-you-earn between now and July 1st of 2028. Now, remember, pay-as-you-earn is phasing out between now and July 1st of 2028. And to be eligible for pay-as-you-earn, originally, you would have had to be a new borrower as of October 1st, 2007, meaning you didn't take your very first federal loans before then, and you would have had to take in federal loans after October 1st of 2011. So you couldn't have had any federal loans before October of 2007, and you had to take at least one federal loan on or after October 1st of 2011. And there's a group of you that are either borrowers that are currently in the SAVE forbearance or are in the old IBR that are eligible for pay-as-you-earn. If you are deciding you want to use income-driven plans towards forgiveness, and that's what makes the most sense for your situation, you might want to use pay-as-you-earn and its more favorable payment calculation as long as you can, at least through this 2028 window. Now, the new rule added additional restrictions of who can enter the pay-as-you-earn plan. And two of the ones are really surprising to me. So not only did you have to be eligible for it, as we originally talked about, but when the rule is in place, you also would have had to be on pay-as-you-earn as of July 1st of 2024, and you couldn't have left pay-as-you-earn on or after that date for another plan. So essentially, if you were not on pay-as-you-earn as of July 1st of 2024, and if you left pay-as-you-earn, so for example, for the SAVE plan, after that point, you would not be eligible to get back onto pay-as-you-earn, which is a surprising and kind of silly roadblock to me. If you're eligible for it, you should be eligible for it. So this is something to keep in mind. If you are one of those borrowers that are currently on the SAVE forbearance or are in old IBR and you're eligible for pay-as-you-earn otherwise, and you want to use income-driven plans towards forgiveness, these additional barriers are something you want to keep in mind. Now, it's important to say that this rule doesn't go into effect until July 1st of this year. So technically, what you may want to do is try to hop onto pay-as-you-earn before then, so that you're not going to be restricted by those additional barriers. Now, I should also say that I don't know if your application for pay-as-you-earn is going to be finished by that point. I'm imagining as all of this is happening, there's going to be a lot of delays happening with things getting processed. So just keep that in mind, but that may be something, if that's you and pay-as-you-earn would make sense for you already, you may want to try to get onto that sooner rather than later. Now, there are other factors to keep in mind, what your income would be if you hop on pay-as-you-earn, because that's going to trigger a need to recertify your income. You're going to have to relook at your income again. So there's other things to keep in mind, but you should know about these additional roadblocks moving forward. The second thing that surprised me is the way that payments under RAP are going to be handled. Specifically, we know that IBR payments or past income-driven payments should be eligible for forgiveness under RAP, meaning those past payments under IBR or pay-as-you-earn, they should qualify towards that 30-year timeline towards forgiveness under RAP if you switch to that plan. But what surprised me is that RAP payments will not be eligible for forgiveness under IBR. So if you were trying to use RAP temporarily, it appears that you can switch off of that plan onto IBR, but those payments under RAP won't qualify for a 20 or 25-year forgiveness under IBR. So keep that in mind. It's not going to count towards taxable forgiveness under IBR. It will still be eligible for public service loan forgiveness. It's still going to have that interest subsidy if you plan on paying off your loans in full, but it's not going to help you towards a 20 or 25-year timeline for taxable forgiveness under IBR. So those are two things I wanted to highlight. If you have questions on any of this, I know there's a lot of changes happening. If you have questions, reach out to me. Student loans. In my work for optometrists, we work at that intersection of practice and personal finances. And a really important part of that, which has a really important impact on cash flow, are student loan payments. And helping optometrists navigate student loan decisions is a really important part of what we do, both for practice owners and associate doctors. So if you need help navigating these decisions alongside all of your other cash flow and investment and tax planning or practice financials decision-making, reach out to me. Would love to help you make the right decisions for you. And hopefully this is the last student loan episode we have to do for a while, which would mean that things are settling down a little bit for ODs on this front. There are a few different directions I'd like to go from here. I want to do an episode on IPOs, initial public offerings. There are a lot of questions out there on some of the online optometry groups I see asking about, should you invest in these IPOs? Can you invest in these IPOs from companies like SpaceX? I want to talk about what research and history shows us about how well IPOs perform. Hint, it's not great shortly after the IPO, but also talk about how IPOs are handled from the perspective of things like index funds and other similar funds. So I want to do an episode on that. And then I want to do a series on the 4 to 5 really key questions that practice owners need to solve as you plan for the sale of your practice down the road. So look out for those to be coming out over the next few weeks. If you have any questions, again, reach out to me, podcast@optometrywealth.com. Really appreciate your time and your attention today. We'll catch you on the next episode. In the meantime, take care.
Want more resources to help master your money? Check out the Education Hub on Yvonne's website at optometrywealth.com. Yvonne Mindren is a certified financial planner and owner of Optometry Wealth Advisors, a California registered investment advisor. All opinions of Yvonne and his guests are their own. This show is for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for specific investment, legal, tax, or other decisions. Clients of OWA may own securities mentioned on this show.